Hi students, let's take a look right now at Chapter 2, which deals with the tools, the standards that exist to help both consumers and nutrition professionals plan a healthy diet. Select the individual foods that will come together to make up a healthful diet. So the committee determines from research an estimated average requirement, or an EAR. This is essentially a number that would meet the needs of half of the population. I don't want to put out a standard or a suggestion that will only meet the needs of half of the people out there. So from the EAR, the committee derives an RDA, or recommended dietary allowance. This will be about 50% higher and will meet 95% of individuals' needs for that nutrient. For some nutrients, there is not a lot of information available. The committee feels they cannot establish an EAR and then consequently an RDA. And so in that case, they look at best evidence and they come up with a suggestion that they have labeled an adequate intake. The adequate intake tells us that there just isn't as much research available. The committee acknowledges this, and perhaps it's more likely that these numbers will change in the future. It is also possible to overconsume certain nutrients, not typically from normal foods, but especially when people start adding supplements to their diet. It's possible to get into areas where certain vitamins and minerals can be toxic. The committee wanted to set out some warning levels, and they identified those nutrients who have the potential for being toxic, and then they also identified an amount where the individual will just begin to approach that toxicity. I don't want to suggest that at the tolerable upper intake level, or the UL, that will become ill or develop these symptoms, but these are a ceiling, and for these nutrients, it would be much better if you did not go over this particular ceiling. The dietary reference intakes also include an estimate of energy needs. Again, they make one estimate for everyone in a category. So we know that every woman between the age of 19 and 30 does not have the same energy or calorie needs, but one standard number is kind of derived, and that is used as the standard whenever calories have to come into the picture to make a recommendation. So the EARs, again, this is the amount that is derived from research, and it will meet the needs for half, or 50% of the population group. The RDAs are the amount that will meet the need of 95% of the population group. And so we believe that this is an amount that will prevent deficiencies, yes, and also keep us as healthy as possible and prevent chronic diseases. The adequate intakes are established when there's not enough data for an EAR and an RDA, and the upper limits are in fact just that, an upper limit or a ceiling of where a nutrient has the potential for becoming toxic. To kind of give you the perspective on how these abbreviations, and it's a little like alphabet soup, how do they compare to one another? The EAR runs at 50%. The RDA is going to be at 95% of the needs of 95% of the population. The upper limit is the area where the nutrient has the potential to just start to move into toxic concerns. And then if inadequate intake is kind of a best guess, and it may be anywhere between the RDA and the upper limit. These are a little confusing. Spend a little time on them. Make yourself some flashcards with the definition and try to become a little bit familiar with these abbreviations. Now, also included, because some nutrients, the amount that we need actually depends on the calories that we consume. So the RDIs have to have a rough estimation of caloric needs, which we call the estimated energy requirements. And they're a very average daily caloric need for each lifestyle. Their goal is to shoot for a healthy weight, but again, for one individual, they're not very accurate. For everyone, for example, between the ages of 19 and 30, they probably do represent an average energy or caloric need. So what do I use these DRIs for? Well, when I start using computerized analysis of food records, and you will get a result and it will say you consumed so many milligrams of a particular vitamin, and in fact, this was 110% of your requirements. The RDAs and the adequate intakes are used for the standards in a program like that. It is appropriate to use them for diet planning, both for individuals and for groups. But we do have to remember that the DRIs are really only written to apply to healthy people. When individuals develop disease conditions, the way their body functions changes, and nutrient needs also change. When an individual has to take medications to control conditions, this will also change needs for particular nutrients. That then will become the job of the registered dietitian to adjust normal standards to those that are most helpful for the individual who doesn't really fall into the category of optimum health. That is what you will get and learn about in future classes, Medical Nutrition Therapy 1 and 2. Okay, so moving to another tool, and the daily value, and I, like you, I'm kind of going, oh, not another abbreviation. But the daily value is the term that is used for the standards that show up on a nutrition fact label or a food label. There actually are 4 sets of these standards. The one that we see most of the time is done for all people over the age of 4. There is a separate set for infants, for toddlers, and for women who are pregnant or lactating. I will only see those used in foods or nutrition supplements that are specific to infants, toddlers, and women who are pregnant or lactating. So within the daily values, we will see that there are reference daily intakes and there are daily reference values. The RDI is what is used for vitamins and minerals. It's actually based on the dietary reference intakes, and then the individual numbers are the adequate intake and the recommended daily allowance. We tend on the food label, the RDI, for example, will look at calcium and it will select the very, very highest number for calcium. So that tends to be 3,000 milligrams, and that is what is needed by people in adolescence as well as during pregnancy. So no one needs more calcium than those particular groups of people, but that becomes the 100%. So if you are not a growing adolescent or someone who is pregnant, then in fact you don't need 100% of the RDI for calcium. But again, this is a matter of we're picking one standard to try to make a nutrition fact panel that is usable for most people. The dietary reference values are those that relate to energy. The nutrition fact label is always based upon a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So when it tells you that a certain percentage of your fat is being provided, that percentage of fat, that percentage of protein will actually be based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. If you burn and use more than 2,000 calories a day, the nutrition fact label will be low for you. If you are an elderly individual without a lot of exercise, it will be high for you. The nutrition fact panel is supposed to be based on a standardized serving that people in the United States typically use. I don't know if that's entirely true, but certainly do, if you're using the nutrition fact panel, look and see what is considered the serving size. You have a list on this slide of all of the nutrients and substances that have to be listed currently on a nutrition facts label. The blanks that you want to fill in are vitamins A and C. Also, if this product is making a claim, for example, that it is a good source of folate, then it will have to include folate on the label, although folate isn't usually found on a nutrition facts panel. Spend a little bit of time looking at this diagram and reading through the definition of the required components of a nutrition fact label. If you would like to see the full set of regulations, here's the link. Go ahead and take a look at what the language actually looks like. And I do want to point out that the nutrition fact panel is in the process of being changed, and manufacturers will have a certain number of years to make this transition. The newer one is on the right, the older one is on the left. Some of the big differences: calories in the serving becomes much more visual and noticeable in the new fact panel configuration. The new fact panel also addresses not only total sugars that are in the food, but differentiates between sugars that occurred naturally and sugars that were added in processing. The old panels addressed vitamin A, C, calcium, and iron. The thought was that if you met those four in your diet, A, C, calcium, and iron, you probably met the needs for everything else. The new panel focuses on one vitamin and 3 minerals that are probably of major concern in the United States. Calcium stayed, but vitamin D is a major concern because so many individuals are in fact testing as vitamin D deficient. And so it was felt that knowing that information would be very helpful to the consumer. Iron and iron deficiency anemia is probably the most prevalent nutrient deficiency condition we have in the United States. And then potassium is also a newcomer. Potassium is actually low in most American diets. It would be better if people had more potassium than they do. However, I think potassium showed up on the nutrition fact panel because for people with kidney failure, over-consuming potassium can be dangerous and even life-threatening. And so for those people to have the information at their fingertips, how much potassium is really in this food is a very, very critical piece of information to have. Spend a bit of time reading through your textbook and looking at the information about what kinds of language and claims can be made on a food package. The language and what can be printed there is in fact pretty closely regulated and quite specifically defined. All right, this slide is in here to kind of let us pause and think about a few things. Here's some of the alphabet soup terms. Can you go back and tell me the difference between an RDI and a DRV? And then if you're looking at a nutrition facts panel, which of the nutrients on the fact panel should people aim to stay below 100%? Yeah, there actually are some like sodium and cholesterol and saturated fat, but it would be great to actually be less than 100%. One last concept before I stop this particular part of chapter 2 is the concept of energy density and nutrient density. And this kind of lets us compare one food to another food. Energy density is comparing a food's nutrient content or calorie content per gram of weight. So a high energy density food like potato chips has more than 4 calories in a gram of potato chips. A very low energy density food like lettuce and strawberries has less than 0.6 calories per gram. When I can identify those foods that have low energy density, they'll help me feel full and satisfied, and may be very, very helpful to individuals who are interested in weight control. I am a little more fond of the concept of nutrient density, where I look at a food and I compare foods to one another by looking at the nutrients that are provided by the calories that are contributed. So let me show you this example of a tool that I think is visually very appealing and shows a concept very well. If I compare 8 ounces of a cola soda drink to 8 ounces of skim milk, what I'm going to see is the calories in the soda are actually a bit higher. Oh gosh, maybe 8% of calories, whereas the calories in the skim milk are maybe only 4 or 5% of an adolescent female's RDA. But the milk provides me with a significant amount of protein, vitamin A, riboflavin, and calcium in particular, almost up to 20% or over in all of those nutrients. So this is what I would call a nutrient-dense food, because it gives me more nutrients percentage-wise than the energy or calories that it supplies. The soft drink, on the other hand, is an empty calorie food. Yes, it is providing calories, but no nutrients for the calories that are received. Okay, I'm signing out for the first half of this, and I will be with you for part 2 shortly.